Hello everybody, I'm Code for Broke, requesting that you burn me when this journey ends. Clergymen, turn me into ashes. I've been making my dream game for 3 long years now, which is insane looking back at it. It's exactly what every YouTube channel on the subject will tell you not to do. Instead, you should make some small thing you don't care about, desperately try to make some money off of it, and in a decade or so, after multiple successes, you might get the chance to work on something you actually have passion for. Because dreams are big and hard, in many ways the opposite of my, junk. We should try dreaming smaller instead, they say, or at least buy those chewable tablets I hear podcasters mention all the time. And that might be solid advice for some people, but for some reason when I hear it, my brain processes it like this. Someone told you not to do something, let's do the exact opposite instead. And so today we're going through the development of a game with a massive scope that creeps eternally, 3 years in with absolutely no end in sight, and everything it's cost me in the process. And you can tell me at the end whether or not you think it's worth it. That's right, folks, it's a recap episode. So this game's 3 years in, but really my first attempt was back in college, in March of 2018. I made this 2-dimensional game in Java, and it was essentially the same game I'm making now, with limb-specific damage, generated weapons, but I knew enough at the time that I didn't know shit, and the project's code was already a poorly performing spaghetti mess. Plus, it was written in Java. It wasn't until 2021, after some years working as a professional software developer, that I felt I was ready to make the real deal. Now, if you play video games, you're used to seeing them in a finished state, and if you follow developers on YouTube, you might see games not quite finished, but far enough along to show off. Today I'm going to show you the very first commit to this game's repository. Literally a shitty Unity project that anyone could make right now for free today. It's got sprite sheets stolen from Diablo, seizure-inducing diagonal movement, and you have to kill the process in Task Manager just to close the game. Good God, it's come a long way. There's a bit of a gap here while I built the game up enough to show off, taking us to December of 2021. I made my first proper 3D model, the human character I still use today. It was self-taught in Blender with some basic animations, and I explored rendering the character into sprites. In an unlisted video on this channel from December 2021, you can see the basics of the game forming: combat, blood, and 2D sprites of complete characters. And I say complete because if you've been here before, you know the current state of the game allows limbs to be removed without the character dying. Something that's not possible with a complete character sprite unless you rendered new sprites for every combination of missing limbs possible. In February of 2022, that changed. I created the prototype of a functioning limb system that would make this possible, by rendering sprite sheets for each individual limb of a character and Frankensteining them together. You can see at this stage when the animations play there are ugly seams between the limbs, a visual issue that existed for a long time afterwards. At this point the cost wasn't monetary and I'd only suffered minor psychosis trying to get all of this to work. Nothing I couldn't handle though. From there I started adding a laundry list of different small features. I added a Diablo-inspired Tetris inventory system in March of 2022. And in July, I added procedural building generation to create cribs for the homies. In September, I added this abomination of a character creation screen, which still exists in the game today. I also added a zombie virus, which was never meant to be the focus of the game at all, but rather just how future zombie enemies could perform. Although I think a lot of people at that point thought I was making a worse version of Project Zomboid. At the end of that same month, I added primitive day-night cycle and the ability for characters to display text above their head, letting them fire off quips while they went about their day. In October of 22, I added the ability to lock characters in cages, some new animations for picking things up and running, and let the AI drag unconscious characters to prisons, creating some semblance of law and order in this imaginary world. And of course, the ability to butcher and cook characters' limbs. In November of 2022, I added a character stat panel and the ability to recruit other characters into your own faction. I made a sprite generation system for dropped items, and the ability to throw things, and a dialogue system eventually that allows for player input. In December, I added weapon generation for randomized stats, again, like Diablo, but also like Dwarf Fortress, where each item has a material it's made out of. At the start of January 2023, I finally resolved the sprite sheet seams that were driving me mad, And later that month, I updated the sprite renderer to include lighting, completely changing the look of the game. In the beginning of February 2023, I just made a bunch more models to try and fill the scene with some more detail. At the end of February, I made a bunch of animations for entering combat mode and strafing in an effort to revamp the combat a little bit. At the start of April 2023, I added bombs. That's pretty much what the whole video was about. Not sure what I was thinking there. I was probably drunk at the time. Alcoholism is, of course, a cost of solo indie game development. Later that month, I added the shield, and with it, of course, blocking. Also made armor actually function and added several pieces of equipment, like this plate helmet, but also a piece for each limb so you could actually wear a full set of armor. In June of 2023, as evidence of my advancing mental decline, I made an entire video in a fake British accent. Do not go watch it. At the time, I added AI jobs that had some humans designated as town guards, and loot tables so I could distribute specific loot to different characters. In July, I revisited the day-night cycle with beds the AI would go to lay down in at nighttime. Pretty neat. In August of 2023, I created the Goblin models, completely differently than my original humans and with a way better result. My Blender skills had come a long way by then, and the characters were much lower poly, so if I wanted to add fully three-dimensional characters into the game in the future, this was now actually possible. In October, I made a new cage model and actually implemented the goblins, which I despise, but the fates forced my hand. It was at this point that the game development and not the psychoactive chemicals started giving me visions. The cost all who walk this path shall pay, I'd think. In November, I set the AI up to have the goblins raid a little human village. It was an outstanding success as far as YouTube is concerned. In December of 2023, I added currency and a proper loot dialogue, so containers could stop spitting out all of their contents the moment you open them, although I did kind of like that. January of 2024 was a real turning point. There was a dark cloud looming over me because I was avoiding a massive feature that was necessary to achieve what I'd imagined for this game, and that was generating a world in chunks and seamlessly loading them in and out as the player moved like any other open world game. In February, that effort continued, improving the aesthetics of the world generation and allowing the chunks to save and load dropped items inside of them. Now I had a new problem. Unity's pathfinding system just wasn't quick enough to generate nav meshes at runtime, and the results couldn't be saved and loaded. Stuck between a rock and a hard place, in April of 2024, I shelled out $100 for my first and only asset, the A-Star Pathfinding project, which was the answer to my prayers. But folks, no blessing comes without a price. My AI was ruined, and I would have to rebuild it to function with the new pathfinding. It was 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but hey, it's about the journey. Am I right, fellas? This was around the time my personal relationships really started to fall apart, another cost of doing business, but God gives his silliest battles to his funniest clowns. In May of 2024, I continued with the world generation, adding trees as props and setting them up with the chunk saving and loading system. In July, I started reworking the AI to actually return gameplay to the game. In September, I recruited an actual real teammate, expanding the force to 2. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement that has him work tirelessly in exchange for rice and canned food items. He made a ton of art assets, and now it just looks so pretty, I think. There's so much beauty in the world, folks. And just last month, marking about 3 years, I added goblin villages and fortresses to the world generation, with more help from my new teammate on the art. And that's pretty much been the journey so far. Now, all jokes about the cost aside, the truth is the people on YouTube, Patreon, Discord, Twitter, everyone that's reached out or commented showing support have really made this effort worthwhile, so thanks a lot for that. And apologies to my regular viewers. I know a recap like this is a bit of a cop-out, but the game remains in steady development this day and until my final day, for I have been divinely anointed to toil at this for eternity. Thanks for watching, folks, and I will see you next time.
I broke the cookie, the fortune was fine. I'm not okay, but I'm gonna be alright.